the theory that in the best way explains the relationship between an entrepreneur and a VC is the principal-agent theory. So let's look at this theory a little more closely in order to understand how we can apply that to our specific situation. Start with an everyday life example. We have a principal, and that can be an employer, for example, and an agent, who is the employee in our example, and they have something like a work contract, which puts them basically together. And the principal, he wants that the agent, as the employee, really works for him, and on the other hand, the agent, the employee, wants that the employer really has the work conditions he was talking about in the job interview. And always questions come up. If you look at that situation more closely, again, we're in the same situation, employer-employee situation. For example, does the CV of the agent properly reflects the actual skills and experience of the employee? Did he really put everything into his curriculum vitae and maybe not too much? And did he exaggerate? And the grades are correct and so all sorts of things. So does he fit perfectly for the job? And you might hand in the paper, and the principal, the employer, is never able to get proof for everything you put in a CV. Secondly, when you started working, will the employee use his work PC only for work purposes, or also check his private emails? And at the very end, if the employee works well, the company will earn well, so will the shareholders. And if he doesn't work well, is that also true? This is why you have to think about these points in the work contract, because first of all, you have limited rationality, you have limited information when you start this job, when you start hiring someone. So the information is not always fully available, and you can also not try to get all the information because it takes far too much time. Secondly, you have potential opportunism, which is the case of using the work PC also to check private emails. The employer is not able to check on that on a regular hourly basis or so on. But these two parties are dependent on each other because, as I said before, the employee has to work well, because only if he does that, the company can also make their business and make money, and the shareholders thus can make also their money. And the same situation holds true for an entrepreneur and a VC. And what we do normally is we conceptualize the VC as the principal and the entrepreneur as the agent. And the contract brings these two parties together. It makes these two parties dependent on each other. And again, there is limited rationality. Is all the information included in the business plan really correct? And are there more uncertainties the entrepreneur is not talking about? On the other hand, is also the VC telling the truth about how he can help in the future? That's typical examples for limited rationality. Secondly, potential opportunism. Will the founder really use the money and the purpose to build the business, or also for private consumption because he likes a great company car and only flies business or something like that? And thirdly, these two parties are dependent on each other because the VC gives money to the entrepreneur because he wants to have more money back, and that's his dependency. And on the other hand, the entrepreneur is dependent on the VC's money and also on his advice in building some or bringing some value to the company. So only if the entrepreneurial team works well and the company becomes valuable, the VC also can realize his own exit. Now, how do these two parties deal with this situation in practice? The VCs and the entrepreneurs. Well, if the VC has limited rationality, he has limited information, he tries to get more information. This is why he does a due diligence. On the other hand, you as an entrepreneur, you carefully select potential VCs, as we've seen in week 2. So both parties basically do their homework in order to reduce the information asymmetry between those two parties. Secondly, when it comes to opportunism, the VC starts introducing control terms. And now you can see there is a good reason for control terms in also a VC contract, because it can reduce potential opportunism of the entrepreneur. He can, for example, say, if you buy a company car or lease a company car, you have to ask me before. And then he can easily prevent himself from that situation described before. The entrepreneur uses the money for his private consumption. On the other hand, the agent, he also seeks advice from experienced founders and lawyers, not only relies on the VC when getting the advice. And thirdly, if you look at the dependency, if you look at the value creation they would like to do together, the economic terms in the contract help the VC in order to get his payoff later on. So he puts contractual details in the term sheet and also in the contract in order to have his return, like a drag along that helps him to drag the entrepreneur to sell his company when he needs an exit. On the other hand, what the agent does, he tries to establish a fair price and less dependent situation from a founder's perspective, also in order to get some share of the value which is created in the future. This is what the two parties can do before the deal. And you can see it is in here and over here, so with the control terms and the economic terms about the term sheet. This is why it's important to understand that relationship. Secondly, they can also work together after the deal and try to establish their relationship accordingly and try to think about that situation when they close the deal. Again, limited rationality. And what can you do when you close the deal? Well, you also have measures for that. So starting with the limited rationality, you can establish a reporting. So the VCs wants to see reports on a regular basis in order to understand what the entrepreneur is doing, in order to prevent the entrepreneur to act opportunistically. And the agent on the other side, you as the entrepreneur, you can look for trust-building actions through open and frequent communication. So you can try to establish this trustful relationship that the VC really thinks he has full information. Secondly, how to prevent both parties from opportunism. Well, the VC will execute his control rights, information, and monitoring rights. And this is again why you find these contractual details in the contract. What is the agent doing, the entrepreneur? Well, he will give the information, as much information as possible, in order to show the VC that there's no opportunistic behavior involved. And last but not least, they both dependent on each other. And while the VC will closely monitor the team, and on the other hand, you as an entrepreneur, you claim promised value-adding activities to the VC. So basically what you do is you add value to the company, and then this dependent relationship is really a very positive relationship. Now you're able to see this is a very complex situation, and it sounds always really, really complex when it comes to theory. But it is a very easy situation. You have a VC and an entrepreneur. They don't know everything about each other. They depend on each other because they make a contract, and you want to prevent that they cheat on each other. Now you might ask the question, is this really necessary in those days? Why don't we have those handshake deals? Well, look at this example. MotionLoft. MotionLoft provides real-world analytics for store owners who want to analyze pedestrians and vehicle traffic passing by their stores. It's a solid business idea. It's still a business idea. Why shouldn't you do offline what you can also already do online? And the former CEO, and now you can see that the story gets more complicated, John Mills, he received high funding by telling his friends and by convincing business angels that he is close to being acquired, and by that promising high returns. So what he basically did is, well, I built up my company is really interesting. I think I'm going to be bought by another company in the near future. Now give me some money. And you can see the bank account over here, the available balance, which was close to 38 million US dollars. What happened to the 38 million US dollars? Well, MotionLoft ran out of cash and seriously into debt. You might wonder, why is that? It's a promising company, close to being acquired. Well, in fact, what the angels and the friends, the people who invested, found out later on that the CEO, John Mills, spent all the money for partying in Las Vegas and dining in Palm Springs. Not all the money, but he really made good parties. And he went with a private jet to either Las Vegas or Palm Springs and spent the money there. Nowadays, he's being accused of defrauding investors and he lost his CEO position. But the fact that this story happens shows how important the contract is from the VC's perspective, but also from your entrepreneur's perspective. If there is information asymmetry, if one party can cheat the other party, or if opportunism can take place, so you have to have a contract. Now, the theory is able to explain these contracts in a very general way. And we get back when we talk about the terms in more detail, because always when new terms come up, and it might be in 3 or 5 years, in your life as an entrepreneur, that new terms come up in new VC contracts, you're able to explain them by using the principal agent theory.